Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Okay, very good. So finish that thought, Bill.
When I go in the back door because there's all these people working. Okay, they may be sewing things in a garment factory or building things or whatever. They're all people. They all have families that depend on them. They all have kids that depend on them. And whether I do a good job or not may impact their lives, positively or negatively. That's a lot of responsibility, but it makes me feel really good when most of the time I'm successful. Yeah. I'm successful and they keep their jobs.
Something we ran out of time. I wanted to ask you was, how is bankruptcy court functioning these days? Are the bankruptcy laws working?
The bankruptcy laws are working, but you have to remember that every set of laws, including the bankruptcy code, is really the product of politics and lobbies. And the last time they had a major rewrite of the bankruptcy code, the lobbies for the banks and the lenders were stronger than the ones for the consumers and the debtors. And so the law changed in ways that made it much more difficult to do certain types of bankruptcy. And for example, we now have a limit on the amount of time you have to sell leases that are under market. And it used to be you would have big retailers that would successfully file. Since that changed in the law, and that's been a lot of years, we haven't had a successful big retailer chain make it in bankruptcy. They just don't. They just don't. Most recently, Anna's Linens, we had Buffham's before that. Just, they don't have enough time to utilize that asset.
Is that something you'd change if you could?
I would if I could. I would if I could.
Anything else? Anything else that you'd like to change in bankruptcy law?
No, really. The rest of it is kind of, it's a good balance. What happens is you create leverage on both sides, which results in a negotiation that, if you have intelligent people on both sides, should result in a
Have you ever been, and you laid out how you kind of present the case, like even before Chapter 11, you go to the lawyers, look, here's what we can do.
Right.
Won't it be in all of our interests to avoid bankruptcy? Right. Have you ever had cases where there was just a vendetta and one side or the other?
Oh, sure. Sure. I had a case one time for a guy. He owned a company that made bombs for the government. And his wife was an integral part of the business. And he ended up dropping her and marrying his young secretary. And she, because she got paid alimony and other things, became the chairman of the committee. And the first time he came to see me, he came in with this book. And he says, both my wives are the same. And the first page says, my first wife was 22 when I married her. My second wife was 22 when I married her. And it went on like that. Oh. And she couldn't care less about the money. She was just going to drive him into the ground.
And did.
And I had a client one time, I won't name him, but a shopping center developer. And we had a woman at Wells Fargo Bank, nice lady, sophisticated, smart, in the loan section. And she was impossible to deal with. Just impossible. Mean to be mean. And she looked like a Dallas cowboy cheerleader. She had that Texas accent. And I said, I don't understand this. So I go to my buddies at Wells and I say, how come she's doing that? And my guy was a big, tall, good-looking guy who had been a kind of womanizer around town. And the guy said, every time she looks at him, she sees every guy that ever lied to her. I'm sorry. I can't fix that.
Okay, so, well, let's say I jotted down Fletcher Jones. We can save that for another time. Sure. Okay. And Chi-Chi's, you want to talk about Chi-Chi's for a moment?
Chi-Chi's was interesting.
This was the restaurant
They
chain.
defined Mexican food in the Midwest and East, but not very well.
All right, and that's why maybe people here wouldn't be familiar with it. I was, because I lived back east, and it was huge.
They had 350, 375 locations. The day we filed a bankruptcy, they had the largest outbreak of hepatitis A, which is the bad hepatitis, in the history of the country, in their Beaver Falls store. They had gotten scallions from Mexico. They had been grown in a field where a sewage line had broken, and the sewage flowed into it. And when it gets into a scallion, it's in between the layers. You can't get it. So lots of people ate it. Lots of people got hepatitis A. And we had like a dozen deaths, and we had 40 or 50 liver transplants. And
was it coincidental they filed?
No, had nothing to do with it.
It had nothing to do with it. You filed bankruptcy, and by the way, Mrs. Lincoln, here's something else.
Yes, and the issue was, did they get sick before the filing or right afterward? Because afterward, they're an administrative claim with a higher priority. Before, they're just another unsecured creditor. So we had real issues with that in the beginning. There ended up being, I don't know, thousands of hospitalizations and 10,000 immunizations by the Center for Disease Control. And the interesting thing was, it made big news. It was on 2020. It was on CBS, ABC, all the other news stations. And our sales dipped for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, the sales were right back where they were before that. And I'm sorry, if I'm going out for Mexican food and I've seen this on 2020 and everything else, I'm not going to pick Chi-Chi's, but people.
It was a heck of a brand, Bill.
People, I want to tell you, people's memories really do go away.
Yeah.
And you can't imagine how many stores you shop in all the time in South Coast Plaza, Fashion Island, that are in 11s.
Huh.
And you just never know it.
Yeah.
It's just,
wow.
So.
Well, Bill, this was great. Thanks so much for taking the time. Continued success.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I enjoyed doing it.